One of the most common statements I hear from people in my private therapy practice is, I feel so stuck. Today, we're going to explore the stuckness of grief, why this happens, and what to do about it. So if you are feeling stuck in your grief, then this is the right video for you. I'm McRogers, and as a grief specialist, I know that grief needs a revolution, so please join the Grievolution. The early days of grief are busy. There are to-do lists, there are announcements to be made, funerals or celebrations of life to be planned, obituaries to be written, canceling credit cards and passports and lawyers and insurance and maybe house sales, and on and on and on. You can see my stages of grief video to understand my humble theory about grief and steps and stages. The early days of grief involve a lot of doing. But once these tasks of grief start to slow down, we hit a transition into the state of being. And this involves being with the emotions and the realities of the loss without any to-do lists or checklists. So now we ask, why is this such a difficult transition? Well, the early days of grief, though it had shock and trauma, it had direction and a sense of purpose and completion. It had check marks of progress. And then the next stage that I call integration doesn't hold these metrics. It holds ever-changing, challenging emotions that vacillate and occasionally lift us, but often sink us. There is no predictability to our weeks, days, and hours emotionally. There are no easy measures that are available to know if, in fact, we are getting our grief done. And it's the first place that we can start to feel stuck. Next, there are 3 thought distortions that lead us to believe that we are stuck. I call these the 3 Ps. Number 1 is personalization. Grief is isolating and we have no choice but to personalize our experience. The would have, should haves, could haves make us feel personally responsible for the loss. It makes us feel personally responsible for the messiness in the relationship, or it makes us feel personally responsible for not being able to influence the process of the loss, from not being able to stop the loss. Now, it's important to also recognize that our brains are designed to protect us. So it's logical that if we can figure out where we went wrong, where we were responsible, then we can prevent this from happening again. But the trick is that this sense of responsibility is largely fantasy. We can get stuck in the quest of the would have, could have, should have questions. The next, stuck. And number 2, pervasiveness. The early days of loss, the grief is pervasive and persistent. It affects every breath, every movement, every action, every night of sleep or not sleeping, every waking hour, every conversation, every time you are in a car alone, every song you hear, every time you think, I should shower, but don't. Grief is greedy, and this leads us to believe that our grief makes every aspect of our life unavailable. The next, stuck. And number 3, permanence. When we are deep in grief, there is no alternative to believing that we will always feel this way. This normal state of grief is the thief of hope. It makes us wish to leave this world. It shuts down our interest or our ability to engage with the rest of the world or the people around us. It eliminates any purpose to our future. This is where I personally got stuck at the age of 21 because I truly believed I would never feel anything beyond despair and feeling at risk. Can you identify which P you might be stuck in? Let us know in the comments. Is it personalization? Is it pervasiveness, or is it permanence? Physically, grief takes a toll on our body, and prolonged emotional distress can manifest in all kinds of physical symptoms. Some common physical risks of remaining stuck in grief include grief-induced stress weakening the immune system, which makes us more susceptible to illness and infections and inflammation. The emotional upheaval of grief often disrupts sleep patterns, which then lead to insomnia, nightmares, or excessive fatigue. which also can have long-term health consequences. Sustained grief may contribute to the development or the exaggeration of chronic conditions such as cardiovascular disease, diabetes, or any kind of GI disorders. Grief can leave us feeling physically drained, sapping our motivation for living. The emotional risks show up in stress, anxiety, depression, isolation, the inability to engage in connections and conversations with people in the world around us. According to a study published in the Journal of Affective Disorders, around 30 to 50% of individuals experience depressive symptoms after the death of a loved one, and about 10 to 20% can go on to develop a major depressive disorder. Being stuck in grief can create an identity centered around the loss, which hinders any sense of the possibility of personal growth, and the ability to find new meaning and purpose in life is so far beyond us. Grief can also have a significant impact on our financial well-being, especially when the grief feels prolonged and unresolved. So grief impairs our concentration, our focus, our motivation, which leads to decreased productivity at work. This can result in missed opportunities, demotions, or even job loss, increased sick days, and missed deadlines. Grief also leads to impulsive financial decisions or overspending as a means to cope with the emotional pain, a little retail therapy. But that can jeopardize our long-term financial stability. We might miss bill payments. We engage in a lot of retail therapy, having no impulse control, or not being able to organize for our own basic needs. Being stuck in our grief can affect our ability to handle legal and administrative tasks efficiently, such as managing matters of the estate, insurance claims, or any of our own personal financial planning. Our grief is then a protracted experience. So what to do with the risk of being stuck in our grief? Well, of course, I'm going to ask you to seek support. These are the principles that I feel are essential to grief support. I call them the 4 I's. It starts with the intention that you bring to have a different relationship with your grief. Can you even begin to imagine that you can live differently with your grief? Next is information that a skilled grief practitioner can bring to you. Third is inspiration. It's hard to model what you can't observe. So look for grief role models for some inspiration. And finally, intuition. Grief shuts down our sense of our gut intuition, but I believe that intuition is critical to our relationship with our loss and our honoring of who died and who I am now with this loss in my life. Please consider inviting your intuition into your grieving so you don't get stuck. If you want to learn more about these 4 I's, you can watch this video that I will cue up at the end. There are many ways to support your grief: one-to-one therapy, group therapy, art therapy, somatic therapy, creative writing and journaling, online support. There are so many ways to support your grief, to feel some progress. I've created a 5-week online live course to address grief that feels stuck, and you'll find the link in my comment below. If you are feeling stuck in your grief, it's also important to explore what is sometimes a bit of a hidden belief. With support, grief will naturally morph and mature, and oftentimes our grief changing signals a fear response of us moving further away from the person that we love who has died. Our natural reaction to that then is to shut this down as a means of trying to stay close to our person. But it is imperative to recognize that our early grief reactions are not a measure of our love or our loss. Often, they are a measure of our fear. When we can support our grief changing, when we can invite in the possibility that our grief won't always feel like the early days, then change becomes possible. It is all about having a relationship with your grief. When you can intentionally create rituals and honorings of the person you love who has died, that is the measure of your love and your loss. It is grief evolved. Grief is not static, it is a process. And feeling stuck in your grief may be the result of avoiding this hard emotional work. Let me know in the comments if you think this could be part of the reason you're feeling stuck in your grief. As you strive to move your grief from stuck to supported, I send you kind thoughts, kind words, and a kind heart. Thank you and take good care.